So tell me about kind of the journey that brought you into your battle with alcohol, and kind of can you give some background as to kind of how somebody in your situation found yourself in that position?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first tried alcohol when I was a senior in high school. And what had sort of happened was I went to basic training between my junior year and senior year of high school. So I came back and, oh, I'm in the army now. I'm an adult. I'm 18. I can serve our country and all that. Mindset's like, oh, I'll give it a try. And one of those things was just getting together with friends at a buddy's house, and an older sibling who's could legally purchase, like, hey, you want to have a beer, man? You just got back from basic. You deserve it. Okay. But other than that, didn't didn't really drink in high school. Got to college, and freshman and sophomore year, I'll say fell prey to misperceptions in that I thought I had misperceptions about what the normal college experience or behavior was. I was completely misguided, and I thought that was, go out drinking. So I would drink underage freshman and sophomore year, but not to where it really negatively impacted my life, my academics, my family. And where the real trouble started was after my Iraq deployment. Because I may have mentioned already, but I got deployed when I was 21. I was a junior in college. And our first day in country, we had guys injured by a mortar attack. My first week in country, I was driving a Humvee and got blown up by an improvised explosive device. And that's where I suffered that traumatic brain injury. That back then in 2005, is June of 2005, there wasn't much conversation going on around TBIs, or traumatic brain injuries, TBIs for short, because it can be a bit of a mouthful. I was back out on patrol that very next day. Less than 12 hours later, I was back to work. Didn't get screened or anything, wasn't a blip on the radar. So when I fast forward to after that year-long deployment, leading 180 combat patrols, being on the most successful sniper team in our battalion, I came back in May of 2006, just in time, literally just in time to watch all of my classmates graduate. And that would have been my graduation too, had I not been deployed. That sucked. That meant that all my friends were leaving. And I picked back up into college that next fall. I was older than all the other students, all the other juniors, older. And I had, as you can only imagine from the realities of spending a year in combat, I had life experiences that were out of this world compared to the other students. So I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't feel like I fit in. And then pairing that with my undiagnosed traumatic brain injury that was really messing with my life, my post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression, I was struggling. I wanted so much just to fit in. I wanted to just feel normal. I didn't want to feel this brokenness inside, this hurt. And so I did what I thought would make it easiest for me to fit in, and I drank. And I drank to mask my anxiety, my depression. I drank to cope. And I actually like to say that alcohol became, this is a little line that I like to say, is that it was like a misguided medic trying to heal my wounds, but it just made things worse. But on the college environment, with the same misperceptions I had before, and the fact that sometimes too in college, drinking is not only accepted, but oftentimes celebrated. And that became my identity. I got nicknames like Crazy Dave, Killer, and Party Dave as well. And people like being around, hanging out with Party Dave. But those nicknames, they just reinforced the stigma that I was experiencing, that I was facing. They just reinforced the fact that I was different, that I was broken, that I wasn't normal. And that Party Dave became my identity. And so when I wanted or acted different or wanted to change, it was my identity, and I always got pulled right back in.
Can you describe how that feels to be in that position where, like, there's not many things you could do that are outlandish in compared to the average college life. 180 missions in Iraq with a sniper team, that's pretty outlandish compared to the average college student's experience. You didn't feel that normal that
Hmm.
you thought everybody else was experiencing.
Yeah. So I had this, I had a lot of emotions, and I'll try to articulate them. Yeah, emotions are hard to understand. But so I had this sense of a little voice on my shoulder, a little negative voice always there telling me that I'm broken, I'm different, I don't fit in. Those students aren't like me. What do I even talk to them about? How do we even, do I tell them what it was like? Will that just further reinforce the stigma that I am different, that I am crazy, that I am broken? How do I talk about it? I didn't understand the hurt that I was feeling. I just knew something was blah. I wasn't comfortable in group settings. I had nightmares. Didn't sleep for any. My sleep was crap. If I was lucky, I would get 5 hours of sleep a night, cumulative, regardless of what time I went to bed. And I couldn't, sort of twofold. I couldn't I couldn't relax. I was just always on edge, always, my mind always racing with just unwanted thoughts and hypervigilance and what ifs. And so I couldn't quiet that noise. I couldn't relax enough to have fun, to be happy, to feel connected and laugh and joke. And so that's what I tried to use alcohol for. When I drank, I could quiet that voice in my head. I could quiet the noise. And I felt like I could relax a little bit, to not be that hypervigilant state and anxiousness and worry and the what if game, to where I could let loose and have what I thought was fun. But as I reflect back now, it wasn't. It wasn't fun. It just masked, just drowned my struggles, only to amplify them the next day. And that the day after, the hangover just put me in an even darker, bluer state of depression and just not feeling good or happy. And that would then prompt me to just want to keep drinking. Like, I don't want to feel this way, so I'm just going to keep drinking. Just going to keep drinking. And I drank with a purpose. I didn't drink for the flavor, for the fun. I drank to cope, to quiet my mind, to try to ease my worries, my anxiety, my depression.
Do you feel like you have a specific place where it started in this process, or had you had an sort of a consistent inner monologue that just changed the way it kind of manifested?
So early on, the voice was there, but I did not have the level of awareness that I recognized it. Reflecting back, I see that it was there, but probably for the first year and a half, 2 years, my best friend was adrenaline, and that's what I needed to feel alive, to feel that sense of vibrance of life. I needed that adrenaline, because coming off the combat patrols, your adrenaline, you're at such a high state of alertness. That adrenaline is always so high. And I needed that. I missed that. And that was kind of what was overpowering the voice. So I didn't know it was there. But as I grew sick and tired of being sick and tired and hungover, the adrenaline faded and the voice got louder and louder, in especially when I would be still and quiet, the voice would be a lot louder. So it was a slow shift,
So would you say that you lost your moments where most people seek peace and quiet as a means of unwinding, relaxing, whether it's the end of a long day, bad day at work, fight with your spouse, whatever the case is? Would you say that that actually became something you sought to avoid?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I would stay busy, always doing something, always moving, because then when I was still, that was when my mind would get louder. And that was part of why I couldn't sleep, because I was still. I was trying to be quiet and relax. And yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Did you step outside of alcohol as far as when you realized I can't even sleep because the moment I get that level of quiet going on, I would almost classify it as a kind of inner torment.
Mhm. No,
What step into as
uh,
far as like how do I solve this problem in the moment?
mhm. So I stuck with alcohol. A lot of why I attribute that is because it's so socially acceptable,
Hmm.
especially when you're in a small college town, when the weekend starts on Wednesday and Sunday fun day doesn't end until Monday morning. So because of that kind of environment, and also caveat, as a prevention professional now, I know the misperceptions about that environment, uh, that actually isn't the norm. That was just my perceived norm. But yeah, when it came to sleep, I tried lots of stuff, going to bed early, sound machines, that kind of thing. But until I realized my drinking was a problem, that was how I slept. I would just drink until I passed out, until I was able to go to sleep. And now I know that that's not actually sleep. That's not quality sleep. But yeah, that was how I tried to cope with my sleep issues.
You mentioned several nicknames that you picked up along the way.
Hmm.
Can, can you dig into some of that? Do you remember what the settings were when these started? It doesn't sound like most of those outside of an alcohol fueled environment would have come across well. Can you kind of speak to where those came from?
Yeah, from my drinking buddies, my drinking friends. The the crazy Dave came from my adrenaline junkiness, my wanting to chase the adrenaline. That, I would be the wild goofy. Yeah, who cares? I'll do it. Whatever. I'm not afraid, because I figure I survived combat. What's going to happen to me here? Nobody's shooting at me. Nobody's trying to blow me up. So that was kind of what inspired Crazy Dave. But so they gave that to me because of my boldness, my braveness, my willingness to just do stuff that others might not do. But for me, when I was called Crazy Dave, my inner voice was, yeah, it's that PTSD, that anxiety, all those feelings that I at the time didn't know what they were, my mental health. But that's what I heard when they called me Crazy Dave. They thought it was a compliment because, oh, you're so brave, you'll do anything. You're not afraid of anything. But for me, it was received different. And the same thing with Killer. Once they found out I was a sniper, that was why they called me Killer. And I pretty sure they didn't mean anything negative by it. And to them, it was more of a, whoa, you're a badass. But for me, that tied to the concept of moral injury, and that the mix of emotions that I had and didn't understand about the fact that, yeah, I've taken lives. Are we supposed to celebrate that? I don't know that I feel like I should celebrate that. It's not, like, it's just this weird confusion of, why are you like, kudos to you, Dave? That's awesome. You've killed people. Like, that just muddled and confused the hell out of me.
I remember growing up with like I had that like level of idealization of military people,
Hmm.
and we played war all the time. It was this thing that was so big and so abstract that
Hmm.
all you could do is pretend to
Hmm.
be involved in that or take part in the uglier side of that.
Hmm.
And I think it became so over idealized that we lose the fact that there is a kind of a moral and an emotional toll that has to be paid as a part of that. So the people we hail as heroes, you hear them talk about that. I've heard very few people tell stories about how they were proud of what they did during war.
Hmm.
Even when everybody around them is saying, but it was necessary what you did. It didn't matter what war it was, it didn't matter
Hmm.
what the situation was. It was, oh, well, you did what you had to survive. So we had this perfect way of excusing what was done because we thought that was our way of supporting people who had to do those terrible things.
It's
And
a
I don't
weird,
know if we realize the disconnect that is between what they actually experience and what we perceive as just being necessary or normal parts of war.
it is a weird dichotomy in that. So like one example, why I cannot drink tea. I'm not a tea drinker. And that was because actually our second sniper mission, we were actually laid up on the roof of the Iraqi police warehouse in Abu Ghraib, the city, not the prison, in the city, providing overwatch. And what had happened was there was an IED that was a partial dead, meaning the blasting cap went off, but the actual explosive charge did not. So we left it there as bait, basically. And we set up and we just watched this partial IED, waiting to see who would come back and try to reset it. And this was one of the main supply routes where troops were getting blown up pretty much every day. And so as we were sitting there watching it, it was about a 24-hour mission. I'm laying there on this rooftop and I'm bored, but also at the same time, I'm still staying vigilant. It's that weird dichotomy of boredom, but still alert and ready. And then in a matter of what was probably 20 to 30 seconds from start to finish, the IED team showed up to reset the IED. We engaged them and it was over. And so going from the state of boredom to boom, intense action to then stillness was a weird flood of adrenaline and then emotions, because right afterwards, these Kurdish guards that were there at the warehouse came up and they brought chai tea. And they wanted us to all have tea to celebrate the successful mission. I know that by taking that IED team out of the equation, I was saving lives, because there have been several lives lost, several people injured. Like it's a good, successful mission. So there's that positive. But now there's those images of the people, the IED team, those individuals, the fact that I've killed people. It's a weird balance. Like, yeah, I'm proud of it, but also it's like, but should I feel proud of it? Should I not feel proud of it? And so now whenever I'm around and somebody offers me tea, it takes me right back to that rooftop and that feeling of confusion, proud, but also shame or guilt or, yeah, I still don't know how to fully articulate it.
I don't think you can separate the two. I think it's a marriage of wild inconvenience between those
Mm-hmm.
two emotions. And I think it's hard for people to understand that, because there are very few things you can do in life that will take two seemingly opposite emotions
Mm-hmm.
and smash them together and attach them to a memory. You can't separate those in that moment. And it's like you're walking around with this internal contradiction that
Mm-hmm.
really has no place to go, because you can make a sound argument for both. And I'm trying to figure out how you would even walk through that in, like, you're sitting with a counselor
Mm-hmm.
or a really good therapist, and how would you even have that conversation and them help you land on one and then cope without the other one constantly being
Have me back on at the end of this year, 2024, and I'll tell you, because I'm actually next month starting the VA's trauma recovery program, and I think the process will actually be CBT, cognitive behavioral.
there? Okay.
They're actually processing CBP to give me a framework to help process those traumas.
Okay.
I know I'm jumping around, but because the longer that I've been sober, the more I've realized that I've never actually dealt with or unpacked my trauma, in that it's still there. And that's what's holding me back still. So yeah, I'm starting that. And yeah, I'll tell you, I'll give you a little after action report.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we would love to have you back. Diving kind of right back in, then you
Mm-hmm.
spent a year in Iraq, 180 missions. Back in college, you're getting the nicknames. They don't realize the impacts that some of those are having. How does this impact you towards getting into recovery?
Mm-hmm.
How did you manage to kind of like shift the way you were coping to identify the problem and then also go about kind of changing things to yourself?
So we're going to condense about a 10-year journey for
Okay.
this right here. But we can dive in, zoom in wherever you'd like. So the very high level overview is that I had 2 years to finish my bachelor's. And by the end of that 2 years, I realized that my lifestyle was not healthy. I wanted to change. I didn't like that my identity had become Party Dave, Crazy Dave, or Killer. But I didn't really know the root of my unhappiness. I didn't know. My TBI still had not been diagnosed. My PTSD still had not been diagnosed. Same with my anxiety. None of that had been diagnosed. I was struggling, suffering in silence without any help. And I felt like if I asked for help, that would be admitting weakness. See, I dealt with so much in Iraq. Why couldn't I handle going to college, just being a college student, having friends, having relationships, getting close with folks, and feeling, comfortable sitting at a restaurant?
So that expectation of you need to handle your business, does it ever really go away for military people, especially combat veterans?
No, never really goes away, but you can shift your thinking. And like for me, there's two kind of main lines of thinking now that I remind myself of is that even on my sniper missions, I didn't go at it alone. I always had a battle buddy. Usually actually had 3 other guys. We ran in teams of 4, not the stereotypical 2. Always, never went out alone. Not just a core team with me. We had a QRF. We had other folks on patrol. We had folks on the call for help. And so knowing that, why would I face this alone? But then also knowing sort of the analogy is if my car's not working right, something's wrong with it, I take it to the mechanic, the professional, to fix it because I'm not a mechanic. I don't have that knowledge or skill set, so I go to somebody who does. Same thing with my mind, my mental health. I have a broken bone, I go to a doctor to get help. So applying that same kind of thinking to my mental health as well definitely does help. But yeah, so 2 years, I knew I needed to make a change. I wanted to make a change. I didn't know the root cause of my behavior, didn't have any of that understanding, wasn't ready to ask for help from others. So I thought I would do it on my own. And it happened that when I graduated my bachelor's, I got a job in Colorado. And I was moving to a town where I'd never met anybody. I'd only talked to my boss on the phone for a phone interview. And in my mind, I was like, okay, new state, new town, those nicknames, those identities, I'm leaving them behind. I can start fresh. I can change. And I tried, but I eventually got pulled right back into the Party Dave lifestyle. Same thing happened when I moved back to Illinois. Then when I moved to Florida and spent a summer living in Florida, these different changes, like moves, big turning points in life, new jobs, new house, new places living, new friend groups. I tried to use those as an opportunity to change, but kind of twofold. Like I said, I didn't actually identify what the root cause was or what any of the intervening variables like alcohol was. I didn't have that information. I didn't ask for help either. And I never made sobriety recovery my goal because I never identified alcohol as being that contributing factor. And those were the things that really held me back in reaching recovery from, I got back in May of 2006 till 2017. So that's about a 10-year span, 11-year span there, just kind of condensed a little bit.
Gotcha. You used the term, I think it was an intervening, help me
Variable.
out. Okay. I don't know that I've heard it, and I spent time in prevention. For people who've never heard that term before, expand on that. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I've got my root cause, my trauma, my mental health that were kind of the underlying issue, the reason for my mental health issues. And in between the symptoms that show up in the root cause, there's the alcohol. that contributed to, that amplified my symptoms, those negative outcomes, those negative impacts. And so once I identified alcohol as being the culprit, the adding fuel to the fire, making things worse, it was that first big domino in my path to recovery. But once I named it, once I declared it, once I identified it, I could focus on it and change it to then be able to work on the root cause, my mental health.
What did that look like when you named it?
I was actually in a work meeting and we were kind of doing this coaching activity where, and this is my favorite, I actually used it earlier this week during a presentation, in that you have 60 seconds. And listeners, if you want to actually follow along and do this right here, right now, you can. But you take 60 seconds and you write down every word that comes to mind that you would use to describe yourself when you are at your best. So list all the words. I'm organized. I'm well rested. I've got a clear-cut agenda, a task that I know I need to do. I've got friends by my side. Whatever those words are, how would you describe yourself when you're at your best? Then from that list, circle your top 3. Those top 3 words that you would use to describe yourself when you're at your best. Then think about those 3 words. What is taking you away from being able to live out those 3 words every single day? And I'm sitting there in a meeting with other prevention leaders and bam, hit me like a 2x4 right to the forehead. Alcohol. That's what was taking me away. And that was when I realized that I needed to make sobriety, abstinence, my focus, my goal.
So you were already working in substance use prevention when you're having this timely realization that you have a problem with a substance.
So I knew I had a problem with it, but to what extent and degree? So even while I was working as a police officer, before I even started an actual prevention, I still struggled. I wasn't drinking every day, but I would still use alcohol to cope. My weekends, I would still drink to black out. And so my drinking was contained to where it didn't impact my work, the different jobs that I held. And I felt kind of that same confusion in that working as a police officer, working in prevention, knowing that's probably not the healthiest thing to be doing. But hey, you're not driving, it's not illegal. You're not drunk at work. You're not drinking every day. So, drinking's normal. Everybody does it. That's what you do. You go out to the bars on the weekend, right? Still had that same misperception about the norm. And so, yeah, working as a cop, working in prevention, I still did that. Still went out drinking on the weekends, my nights off.
So you have this realization as you're doing this exercise. Describe what the journey was like from there. You've named your dragon, so to speak, and it's time to go about the business of slaying. What was that journey like from hit over the head with realization to I can do this, I'm doing this, and I did it?
Yeah, so I had another move to a different state, a 1-bedroom apartment. Didn't really know anybody in town, and yet again, hey, fresh start, clean break from the past identities. And this time I still started to get pulled back into the party day of life. Still did. But because of my awareness, knowing that alcohol is a problem, I was able to, I'm heading down that path again. Don't do it. And so as I pulled back and I tried to change, I had this tug of war between my old life, my old identity, my not wanting to feel alone in my 1-bedroom apartment in a town where I didn't know anybody. And you work from home, how do you make friends? You go out and you go grab drinks. So it's this constant back and forth pull. And in that, I felt this darkness coming back. even louder, this depression. And probably the next big turning point after that 2x4 hit me of alcohol is my problem, I read Brene Brown's book, Braving the Wilderness. I was unhappy. I was depressed, and I was trying so hard to change, to break out. And reading her book, Braving the Wilderness, it told me that I had to go within. The journey, the answers lie within. And it helped me realize and connect the dots that those identities, Party Dave, Crazy Dave, like it helped me name that those were identities. And that's why it was so hard to change, because I had to break free from those. It wasn't simply just, changing a habit. It was changing my identity. And through that awareness, I was like, okay, I'm a little more empowered. I know what I got to do now, why it's been such a hard struggle, but I didn't know who the real Dave was. I had lost that identity. Didn't know how to get back to being the real Dave. And so I journaled. I mean, I can see it. I can feel it on my 1-bedroom couch. I've still got the actual journal right over here on my bookshelf. I just brain dumped, just wrote the story of my life, trying to unearth, to rediscover the real Dave. And once I did, I then felt this new sense of freedom in that, okay, that's who I really am. Okay, who do I want to be? So then I was free to think about, what kind of man do I want to be? Who do I want to grow into? What does that person look like on a random Tuesday? How do I want to show up? How do I want to treat others? How do I want others to treat me? Who do I want to be? What do I want my identity to be? And so once I had that clarified, crystallized, I was able to get after it and start doing it. And I leaned on my natural strengths. So I asked myself, what made me a good student? What made me a good soldier? What were those natural skills that I had that have helped me succeed in the past? How can I use those to become that man that I want to be, that new identity? So I leaned on my strengths. I journeyed within. I braved the wilderness within to find the tools, the strengths that would help me reach sobriety.
It's a big realization, I think, to move from the mentality of I don't want to be this. I think that's sort of where anxiety and depression lead you. Uh, Whatever you're going through, it's this mentality of like I don't want to be this. It's like with depression, it's like I don't want to feel this way. With anxiety, I don't want to be afraid. I don't want to be concerned about XYZ circumstances or what could happen. Um, Learning my own journey, there's two kinds of anxiety that I see as very different, and they're hard to understand coming from the other person. There is looking back, did I make mistakes? What should I have done differently? And am I ever going to recover? And there's looking forward, going like, what if this happens? Like, why can I do this? Like should I be prepared for this? And they're like two very different forms of it that could be an affliction, but there's a part of going from I don't want to feel this way to I want to, this is what I want to be. This is who I want to be. And I feel like there's a level of empowerment that happens there because just not wanting to be something, that's usually that's focusing on the problem. It's that I'm trying to back into the garage, and if I focus on the side of the garage, I'm going to hit the garage. So focusing on where you want to be as opposed to what you're trying to avoid. And I think that's a huge step that a lot of people struggle to make because it is a giant perspective shift that requires investment in time. So I know journaling, I use that mechanism myself when I got out of law enforcement, and it was the same. It was just memory dumping. It was whatever came out on the page was just what I was feeling. It got to the point where, like, if I did that before bed, I slept better because I got to. This is going to sound offensive, but I got the crazy out before I got to bed and then laid there with all my crazy because that kept me from having the peace of mind to transition from what happened today and do I need to break it down to I just need to shut down and go to bed. And that was huge for me. But knowing that you kind of found that purpose, finding the right book is huge. I think a lot of people miss great literature as in like they see it as they label it as self-help and it becomes this like well, that's for people who need help. It's like most of us do.
Yep.
Most of us need something, and it's usually about finding what the right direction or the right kind of structure to go from that. Here's what I don't want to be to here's what I want to be. And I think that's a big part of the journey that people miss when they're focused on how they want to be perceived versus how they want to be.
Hmm.
Um, go from there. What was kind of your next step in the
Yeah.
process towards recovery?
Yeah. So talking about books, I became very intentional about my personal growth. I read I became a reader. I was never an avid reader, but I became a reader, and I read all of those self-help books, and they, in my mind, they weren't about help. I read them because I wanted to grow, to learn how to be the best me possible. And I read a ton of books. And what I want to tell the listeners, like, get out there and read. And if you start a book and it's not really jiving, that's okay. Set it down, pick up another book. Not every book is for everybody. And also, not every book is applicable to your story all the time. They can serve a purpose for a time period to help you get to that next step, that next phase, that next era. And then it's time to find that next book that will help you reach your next level. So I did that. I read books. I listened to podcasts that brought a positive perspective, that taught me about myself, taught me about others, taught me about life. I did a positive mental attitude diet. So for 7 days, a whole week, whenever a negative thought came into my mind, I would say, okay, that's negative. And then I would throw it out, dismiss it. I wouldn't let it stick around. I wouldn't let it grow roots. I wouldn't let it bounce around or ruminate. Dismissed it to help rewire my brain to be more positive.
Hmm.
I put positive messaging, actual framed like pictures and the inspirational quotes you see on Instagram these days. I had all of those on my wall as framed artwork to create such a positive environment, to make positivity the norm, to remind me that the positive exists. It's there. That's what helps me once I looked within to my positive strengths. That's what helped me in my journey. So I just created this positive environment, surrounded myself with positive people, and really focused on trying to learn and grow to be the best me possible. And that's what I did.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of the American Recovery Podcast. This was part 2 of my interview with Dave Closson. Tune in next week for part 3. Check the episode show notes for links that we discussed in the past couple of episodes. We'll see you next week.